The Russian throne was never just a seat of power. It was a stage where wealth, vanity, and extravagance performed alongside politics and war. For centuries, the Tsars and Tsarinas of Russia didn't simply rule. They lived as if the empire itself existed to fund their most outrageous dreams. But what exactly did luxury mean in imperial Russia? Was it a wardrobe with more dresses than there were days in a decade? An entire palace made of ice? A diamond the size of a pigeon's egg worn at breakfast? Or perhaps an army of servants tasked with doing things no sane person would ever request? From ice palaces built for bizarre entertainment to banquets that could bankrupt provinces, these rulers blurred the line between grandeur and absurdity. Their lives raise a simple question: were they visionaries of beauty and splendor, or simply dangerously bored with too much power? Today, we step into this glittering and unpredictable world to meet 11 Russian monarchs whose luxury habits defied logic, drained treasuries, and sometimes teetered on the edge of madness. Before we unpack diamond-studded gowns and golden banquets, let's meet a Tsar who thought subtle was a dirty word. Ivan IV, crowned as Russia's first Tsar in 1547, is often remembered for his brutality and paranoia. But he also had a taste for opulence so vast it could rival any European monarch of his time. To Ivan, grandeur was more than a personal indulgence, it was a political weapon. If his enemies were going to fear him, they might as well be blinded by the shine of his wealth too. His throne alone was a masterpiece, a massive seat of solid gold encrusted with gems from Persia, India, and beyond. When he held court, he wore robes woven with gold thread so heavy they could exhaust a man simply from standing. Ceremonial helmets and crowns were covered in pearls, rubies, and sapphires, each piece a statement of divine authority. Banquets under Ivan were spectacles in themselves. Entire halls groaned under the weight of roasted swans, mountains of exotic fruits, and wine imported from distant lands, luxuries almost unheard of in 16th century Russia. Guests were served on golden plates, but woe to the unlucky courtier who displeased the Tsar. Ivan was known to turn lavish feasts into scenes of sudden violence. He also delighted in extravagant gifts to secure loyalty. Nobles and foreign dignitaries might leave Moscow with jewel-studded weapons, intricately carved ivory icons, or bolts of rare silk. But such generosity was always calculated. It kept allies close and enemies feeling indebted. For Ivan, luxury was inseparable from power. Every jewel, every golden goblet, every exotic dish was part of the theatre of his reign. In his world, excess wasn't waste. It was a visible reminder that he ruled by God's will and by his own unshakable command. If Ivan dazzled with gold, our next ruler thought, why stop at metal when you can build in ice? Anna Ioannovna, Empress of Russia, from 1730 to 1740, had a taste for luxury so eccentric it often veered into the absurd. A niece of Peter the Great, she inherited not just the Russian throne, but also a court overflowing with foreign ambassadors, scheming nobles, and endless opportunities to show off her wealth. Her most infamous creation, the Ice Palace of 1740. This wasn't a mere winter decoration, it was a full-sized palace made entirely from blocks of ice taken from the frozen Neva River. Complete with ice furniture, ice sculptures, and even ice dishes, it was a marvel of engineering and cruelty. Anna ordered a political couple she disliked to spend their wedding night there, in freezing temperatures, dressed in nothing but elaborate clothing made from furs sewn together with thin cloth. Anna's banquets were equally extravagant. She adored serving rare delicacies imported at staggering cost, pineapples in the dead of winter, barrels of French champagne, and pastries shaped like imperial crowns. The dishes were served on gold and silver, while orchestras played in candlelit halls draped in velvet and embroidered silk. Her love of jewelry was legendary. Diamonds, emeralds, and pearls adorned her gowns, headdresses, and even her shoes. When she appeared in public, the sheer weight of her attire could rival a suit of armor, though instead of steel, she carried the burden of gemstones. Anna also enjoyed elaborate, themed entertainments, some bordering on humiliation for the participants. One infamous masquerade ball required guests to dress as birds and animals, with masks so elaborate that eating and drinking became a logistical nightmare. For Anna, luxury wasn't just personal pleasure, it was a form of control. The more lavish and strange her court became, the more it set her apart as the ultimate authority in a realm where extravagance could intimidate as effectively as any army. After ice palaces and jewel-crusted gowns, our next ruler decided luxury should be measured in cities, entire cities. Peter I, known as Peter the Great, reigned from 1682 to 1725 and transformed Russia into a major European power. But while history remembers him for his sweeping reforms and military campaigns, Peter also had a taste for grand, unapologetic luxury, though his extravagance often wore the mask of modernization. His most famous indulgence was the creation of St. Petersburg, a city built from scratch on swampland. It wasn't just a strategic port, it was a showcase of opulence and European sophistication. Peter poured staggering amounts of money into importing architects, artisans, and entire shiploads of marble, crystal chandeliers, and gilded decor. The result was a city of palaces, canals, and wide boulevards, a monument to both his ambition and his wallet. Peter's personal lifestyle matched the grandeur of his projects. He had a fondness for lavish European-style banquets, complete with imported wines, fine porcelain from China, and intricately carved silverware. Guests were entertained with operas, balls, and fireworks that lit up the Neva River. His wardrobe combined practicality with extravagance. He favored tailored European coats adorned with gold embroidery and wore jeweled medals even during informal gatherings. And when it came to gifts, Peter was as grand as his palaces. Foreign dignitaries left his court with priceless art, rare books, and custom-made luxury weapons. Yet Peter's luxury was never purely self-indulgent. Each grand gesture was also political theatre, designed to signal that Russia was no longer an isolated, backward kingdom, but a modern empire equal to France or Austria. His palaces, ships, and art collections told the world, and his own people, that the Russian court could rival any in Europe. For Peter, opulence wasn't an escape from ruling, it was part of ruling. By surrounding himself with the trappings of wealth and progress, he ensured his legacy would be etched not just in history books, but in marble, gold, and the very streets of his window to the west. If Peter built cities, our next ruler built something far more personal, a wardrobe the size of a small kingdom. Elizabeth Petrovna, daughter of Peter the Great, ruled Russia from 1741 to 1762 and earned a reputation as one of the most flamboyant monarchs in history. If Peter's luxury was rooted in architectural grandeur, Elizabeth's was stitched, embroidered, and draped in silk. She famously owned over 15,000 dresses, an amount so excessive that entire palace rooms were converted into storage for her wardrobe. Her gowns were imported from Paris and Venice, or custom-made by the finest tailors in Russia, each dripping with embroidery, lace, and jewels. Even her shoes were works of art, crafted from brocade and adorned with gemstones. Elizabeth loved grand balls, and she hosted them with unmatched extravagance. Guests dined under glittering crystal chandeliers while orchestras played through the night. The menus featured delicacies like sturgeon in champagne sauce, French pastries, and exotic fruits brought in at staggering expense. Every detail, from the gold-trimmed tableware to the floral arrangements imported from warmer climates, spoke of her determination to make Russian court life the envy of Europe. Her opulence extended beyond fashion. She commissioned lavish palaces, including the Winter Palace's early designs, and filled them with art from across the continent. Her devotion to beauty was so intense that she refused to have her portrait painted while wearing anything less than her most resplendent attire. Elizabeth's extravagance was not without purpose. She understood that a dazzling court could project stability, power, and cultural supremacy. In a time when European monarchies judged one another by their splendor, Elizabeth's Russia held its own. But she also indulged simply because she could. Reports say she never wore the same gown twice at major events. For Elizabeth, luxury wasn't just a habit, it was a statement. Every dress, every banquet, every palace hall declared her authority and celebrated her reign. And if that meant drowning in silk and jewels, so be it. She reigned as the undisputed queen of imperial glamour. After gowns and glittering banquets, our next ruler proved that luxury can also be deeply, hilariously strange. Peter III, who reigned for just 6 months in 1762, is one of Russia's most eccentric monarchs, and his version of luxury was unlike anything the empire had seen. While other rulers poured their wealth into palaces and jewels, Peter preferred to spend lavishly on toys. Military toys, to be precise. Obsessed with the Prussian army, he maintained an enormous collection of miniature regiments, exquisitely crafted figurines in full uniform, complete with tiny cannons and forts. These were not casual decorations. Peter staged elaborate mock battles for his own amusement, sometimes neglecting affairs of state in favor of his playtime. His personal quarters were filled with imported European furniture, ornate clocks and cabinets overflowing with snuff boxes, each one a jeweled masterpiece. He was known to spend absurd sums on these small luxuries, amassing a collection that could rival a dedicated museum. Peter also had an unusual dining habit. He adored simple German food, but insisted on having it prepared and served with the pomp of a royal banquet. This meant a humble plate of sauerkraut might arrive on a gold platter, accompanied by crystal goblets and silver cutlery. Yet his spending wasn't all whimsical. Peter invested heavily in military uniforms, especially Prussian-style attire for himself and select guards. These uniforms were tailored from the finest fabrics, embroidered with gold thread, and accessorized with imported buttons and polished boots. He was so devoted to this aesthetic that he wore military garb almost constantly, even at private gatherings. In the end, Peter's peculiar tastes and disregard for traditional Russian court customs alienated many of his nobles. His lavish spending on personal hobbies, while ignoring the political stage, helped pave the way for his downfall. Within months, he was overthrown by his wife, Catherine the Great, who would redefine imperial luxury on a grand scale. Peter III's story proves that in the Russian court, extravagance didn't always mean pearls and palaces. Sometimes it meant a gold-plated toy soldier standing guard in a room full of jeweled snuff boxes. After toy soldiers and gold-plated sauerkraut, our next ruler went big. Luxury so grand it could swallow entire kingdoms. Catherine II, better known as Catherine the Great, ruled Russia from 1762 to 1796 and transformed the empire into one of Europe's dominant powers. Her tastes in luxury were as expansive as her political ambitions, measured not in dresses or dinners, but in entire architectural masterpieces and art collections. She expanded and renovated the Winter Palace, filling its halls with imported marble, gilded furniture, and paintings from the greatest European masters. Her Hermitage collection began with a single shipment of 225 paintings from Berlin and soon ballooned into thousands of works, making her court a beacon of culture and opulence. Catherine's personal quarters glittered with gold, mirrors, and silk imported from France and China. Her jewelry collection rivaled that of any European monarch, with diamonds worn casually at court as if they were simple accessories. Her banquets were legendary, tables groaning under the weight of exotic delicacies, pineapples from her own greenhouses, caviar in crystal bowls, and French champagne flowing endlessly. She often combined these feasts with intellectual salons, inviting philosophers, poets, and scientists to dine alongside foreign dignitaries. Catherine was also known for her generosity, at least when it served her purposes. She gifted lavish estates, jeweled snuff boxes, and even entire villages to favorites and allies, using luxury as both reward and political strategy. Her lovers, famously numerous, were showered with titles, palaces, and priceless artifacts. But her grandeur wasn't purely indulgent. Catherine understood that luxury was a tool for diplomacy. The splendor of her court impressed foreign envoys and reinforced the image of Russia as a civilized, enlightened, and powerful empire. Every chandelier, every diamond, every imported tapestry told the same story. Russia was not a remote backwater, it was a central player on the world stage. By the end of her reign, Catherine had cemented her place as one of history's great rulers and as the empress who made Russian luxury a diplomatic weapon. Her empire sparkled quite literally under her command. After Catherine's empire-wide splendor, our next ruler proves luxury can also come with a rulebook and a measuring tape. Paul I, who reigned from 1796 to 1801, had a vision of imperial luxury that was less about indulgent chaos and more about meticulous control. His approach to grandeur was disciplined, almost militaristic, reflecting his obsession with order in every corner of palace life. Paul was a perfectionist when it came to his surroundings. The interiors of his palaces were kept in near-museum condition, with furniture positioned at precise angles and draperies arranged to exact specifications. Servants were instructed to follow detailed protocols for cleaning, moving, and even dusting objects, as if touching them incorrectly could invite disaster. His military background heavily influenced his tastes. Paul loved uniforms, especially ones of his own design, and spared no expense in creating elaborate versions covered with gold embroidery, polished buttons, and silk sashes. He expected his court to dress with similar precision, blurring the line between parade ground and royal reception. Decorative excess still had its place. The Mikhailovsky Castle, his architectural masterpiece, was a fortress-palace hybrid adorned with marble staircases, grand frescoes, and crystal chandeliers that could rival those of Versailles. Every element, from the carved banisters to the door handles, was selected with an eye for both beauty and strict symmetry. Paul's control extended to court etiquette. Balls and banquets were staged with military precision, down to the seating arrangements and the timing of courses. Guests might dine under glittering chandeliers, but they were also expected to observe his rigid codes of conduct or risk his famously short temper. Yet beneath the discipline was genuine extravagance. Paul's treasury funded massive orders of fine porcelain, intricate gold clocks, and portraits framed in precious metals. These weren't random acquisitions, they were trophies in his campaign to make the Russian court the most orderly and visually impressive in Europe. For Paul I's luxury was not about indulgence, it was about command. Every gilded edge, every polished surface, every perfectly aligned candelabrum reinforced one truth. In his empire, beauty served order, and order served the throne. If Paul I measured his curtains, our next ruler preferred to measure luxury in champagne bottles and masked ball invitations. Alexander III, who ruled from 1801 to 1825, is remembered for defeating Napoleon and reshaping Europe's political map. Yet behind the scenes, his reign was also a golden age of aristocratic indulgence, filled with lavish parties, grand European tours, and a taste for refinement that bordered on theatrical. Raised in a cosmopolitan court, Alexander embraced the elegance of Western Europe with enthusiasm. His travels through Paris, Vienna, and other capitals introduced him to the high society luxuries of the time, luxuries he brought home to Russia in full force. The imperial court under Alexander became a hub for masquerade balls, operas, and banquets that could last until sunrise. The Winter Palace was transformed into a social epicenter. Candle-lit halls hosted dinners where the menus featured French delicacies, rare wines, and elaborate desserts sculpted into architectural wonders. Music drifted through gilded corridors with orchestras performing symphonies imported from Europe's most celebrated composers. Alexander's personal tastes leaned toward the romantic and the extravagant. He kept an impressive collection of European art, rare books, and antique furniture. His wardrobe included finely tailored uniforms and evening attire adorned with gold embroidery, silk, and jeweled decorations, perfect for the glittering courts he frequented abroad. Outside of formal events, Alexander enjoyed lavish retreats to his estates where he entertained guests with hunting parties, private concerts, and feasts under sprawling pavilions. These gatherings blended aristocratic elegance with a touch of pastoral fantasy, offering the elite a carefully curated escape from the political tensions of the era. But Alexander's luxury was also strategic. In the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, he used the magnificence of the Russian court to project stability and sophistication on the global stage. Diplomats and monarchs who visited St. Petersburg left impressed not only by his political acumen, but also by the opulence that surrounded him. For Alexander III's grandeur was diplomacy in silk gloves. His court sparkled like the chandeliers of his palace, dazzling, romantic, and impossible to ignore. If Alexander V's court floated on champagne bubbles, our next ruler's luxury marched in lockstep and saluted on command. Nicholas I, who reigned from 1825 to 1855, approached imperial luxury with the discipline of a seasoned general. While he appreciated grandeur, it was grandeur on his terms, controlled, symmetrical, and always in service to the image of a strong, unyielding Russia. His taste in architecture reflected this mindset. Nicholas oversaw major restorations of imperial palaces, insisting on clean neoclassical lines, flawless symmetry, and a level of polish that bordered on obsession. Marble staircases gleamed, gilded moldings shone without a speck of dust, and every chandelier hung at precisely the same height across rooms. Nicholas was particularly fond of uniforms, both his own and those of his court. He commissioned military attire from the finest materials, with gold braiding, polished brass buttons, and perfectly tailored fits. Even ceremonial events took on the feel of parades, with guests aligned in military precision beneath glittering crystal chandeliers. Banquets under Nicholas were formal affairs. The menus were lavish, French wines, game meats, and elaborate desserts, but every course was served with clockwork timing. Seating arrangements were meticulously planned, and breaches of etiquette were met with icy disapproval. His personal collection of luxury items leaned toward the functional yet refined. He favored gold-framed portraits, imperial-crested porcelain, and finely crafted clocks, all arranged with mathematical precision. While some saw this as austere, Nicholas viewed it as the ultimate expression of imperial order, beauty without chaos. For all his rigidity, Nicholas did understand the value of spectacle. Military parades in St. Petersburg were staged like grand theatre, with polished cannons, banners rippling in the wind, and thousands of troops moving in perfect formation. These displays, set against the backdrop of imperial architecture, projected an image of Russia as disciplined, wealthy, and powerful. In Nicholas I's world, luxury wasn't about indulgence, it was about command and control. Every polished surface, every gilded edge, and every precisely timed march reinforced the same message. The empire was as unshakable and orderly as its ruler. After Nicholas I's parade ground perfection, our next ruler traded drills for diamonds and knew how to wear them well. Catherine I, who reigned from 1725 to 1727, had one of the most remarkable rises to power in Russian history. Born of humble origins, she became the wife of Peter the Great, and upon his death, Empress of Russia. With her sudden leap into imperial life came an equally dramatic leap into its luxuries. Catherine developed a taste for the finest fabrics and most opulent jewels the empire could offer. She wore gowns sewn with gold and silver threads, decorated with pearls and gemstones so heavy that her ladies-in-waiting sometimes helped support the weight. Her headdresses, inspired by both Russian tradition and European court fashion, sparkled with diamonds imported from India and emeralds from the Urals. Banquets under Catherine were lavish affairs, blending Russian culinary traditions with the French haute cuisine that was becoming fashionable across Europe. Guests dined on roast game, delicate pastries, and exotic fruits, all served on gold-plated tableware. The Empress was known to enjoy sweet wines and champagne, which flowed freely at her gatherings. Her generosity could be as extravagant as her wardrobe. Catherine rewarded loyalty with magnificent gifts, jeweled snuff boxes, silk gowns, and even country estates. These acts of largesse were not purely sentimental. They reinforced her authority and ensured the loyalty of a court still adjusting to the novelty of a female ruler. Catherine also embraced architectural luxury. She continued Peter's building projects, commissioning ornate interiors for palaces and ensuring her own private apartments were adorned with rich tapestries, gilded mirrors, and fine European furniture. What made Catherine's indulgence notable was its symbolic power. Her transformation from a commoner into the crowned head of the Russian Empire was embodied in every diamond she wore and every glittering banquet she hosted. It was a public declaration that she belonged on the throne and that her reign would be as dazzling as any monarch's before her. After Catherine I's glittering rise, our final ruler took luxury to new heights, just before the empire crumbled beneath him. Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, reigned from 1894 until the Revolution of 1917, and his taste for luxury was as legendary as the tragic fall of his dynasty. Born into the splendor of the Romanov court, Nicholas inherited not just a crown, but a lifestyle built on generations of opulence. He maintained multiple palaces, each decorated with priceless art, gilded furniture, and crystal chandeliers. The Winter Palace alone was a masterpiece of imperial wealth, vast halls draped in silk, walls adorned with gold leaf, and floors inlaid with rare woods from across the empire. Nicholas was a passionate collector. His treasures included Fabergé eggs, intricately designed masterpieces encrusted with jewels and containing elaborate surprises, commissioned annually for his wife, Alexandra. These eggs became symbols of both imperial craftsmanship and extravagant spending. Leisure for Nicholas meant luxury on a grand scale. He enjoyed hunting expeditions in vast private reserves, traveling on a custom-built imperial train fitted with velvet-lined carriages, and cruising aboard the Standard, a yacht lavishly furnished with Persian rugs, marble baths, and a crew trained to serve in near-military precision. Banquets at his court were spectacles of culinary artistry, with French chefs preparing multi-course feasts paired with fine wines and champagne. Even casual family meals were served on porcelain, emblazoned with the Romanov crest. Yet Nicholas's indulgence existed in a world increasingly out of step with his subjects. While the empire faced social unrest and economic challenges, the imperial family's lifestyle remained untouched by austerity. To his supporters, this grandeur symbolized tradition and stability. To his critics, it was proof of detachment and excess. When the revolution came, the opulence that had defined his reign became a stark contrast to the reality outside palace walls. The glittering Fabergé eggs and gold-lined halls could not shield Nicholas II from the forces that would end both his rule and the Romanov dynasty. His story closed not in a ballroom, but in exile, proof that even the grandest luxury can vanish in an instant. From Ivan the Terrible's jewel-crusted throne to Nicholas II's Fabergé eggs, the story of Russia's monarchs is a tapestry woven with gold thread, rare gems, and a healthy dose of eccentricity. Across centuries, each ruler shaped their own brand of opulence, sometimes as a political weapon, sometimes as a personal indulgence, and sometimes as pure entertainment for a court hungry for spectacle. Some, like Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, used luxury to project Russia's power onto the world stage. Others, like Anna of Russia and Peter III, turned their wealth into bizarre personal experiments that still baffle historians. And a few, like Elizabeth of Russia and Catherine I, turned elegance itself into a ruling style. But in the end, even the most dazzling displays could not shield the empire from change. Palaces fall, wardrobes empty, and banquet halls grow silent. Yet the echoes of their extravagance still captivate us today, reminding us that history is never just about wars and treaties, but also about the glitter, the gold, and the glorious absurdities of those who once wore the crown.